Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Sweden, and we're also going to stick to my home county of Skåne here in the very south of the country. For this review we're going to go back to a brewery that has featured on the channel a good number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years, and if memory serves me correctly this will be review number 12 or so that I've done from these guys. So for this one we are going to head a little bit south of me here in Lund to Malmö once again, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Hyllie Bryggeri. So this particular beer is called the Serendipity Double Ipa. It comes in at 8.2% ABV, and I think the name tells you what style of beer this one is. I couldn't tell you exactly what type of IPA this one's going to be, but I'm sure we'll find that out when we look at the aroma and have a taste of it. But yeah, as I said earlier, I've had some really nice beers from Hyllie Bryggeri over the last little while. The brown ale that I had from these guys last month was really quite nice, and I would say that this brewery are mainly known for their kind of IPAs, and their lager beers tend to be very good as well. I still think that the Skånsk lager that these guys do is one of the best kind of non-German lagers that I've ever come across actually. But yeah, the Hyllie Pan is their kind of classic IPA. I would also recommend that you check that out. A very kind of old school West Coast IPA, and for me those would probably be the two best beers that I've had from the brewery so far. But yeah, in recent times they've been upping their output quite a bit, putting lots of different beers out there, and I would say that these guys are one of the breweries that you definitely need to keep an eye on here in Sweden over the next little while. So yeah, excited to try something new from these guys. Hopefully it's another good beer, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. This beer was released as part of the Lokal Småskalig assortment through Systembolaget for February of 2021, and I think this was the only beer that they released this month actually. So yeah, let's see how we get on then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Hyllie Bryggeri as well, and no doubt you will see more added to that list in the fairly near future, because this is a brewery that I keep an eye out for. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Swedish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's constantly being added to, and as always please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, on to my brewery notes then to tell you a little bit about Hyllie Bryggeri once again. So Hyllie Bryggeri, as I've told you already and told you in other videos, it started off as the homebrewing experimentations of Michael Nathors, who's from Vintria, just a little bit to the south of Hyllie in the south of Malmö, and that of course is where this brewery takes its name from, the Hyllie district of Malmö. But for a number of years he was a home brewer, and he built up his own brewery in his garage, and this was where he was just experimenting with lots of different kinds of beer and brewing with his friends. But he started brewing there in around 2013, so he had quite a little bit of experience before starting up the company officially. But he's worked for a number of years in the plumbing industry, and for a period of time he was working 4 days as a plumber and then 1 day with the brewery. And he was also good friends with Torsten Ekne, who is the original owner of Beerditch in Malmö, which is one of the really kind of classic, I guess you could say, craft beer venues in the city. Somewhere that I would recommend you go and have a look at if you come to visit Skåne. But when Beerditch began, Michael decided that he was going to turn his garage brewery into a proper company, so he registered Hyllie Bryggeri officially in 2015, and then it's just kind of grown from there. But these days Michael is joined at the brewery by Erik Fritiof, who is a partner in the company, and he deals with the sales and marketing side of things, and Erik is actually one of the founders of the Great Swedish Beer Festival as well. But in 2019 the brewery joined forces with Psychopipes and Limhamns Brewery to form a new company that owned a brewery building, and it was there that the three companies were brewing their beer for a short period of time. They had a 1,000 litre brew kit, but unfortunately this arrangement only lasted for a few months before Hyllie Bryggeri left and moved to a farm near Vintria, and they brewed there for a little while. They are still brewing down there from what I understand as well. But throughout 2020 They were contract brewing a number of their beers, but they've just invested in a new premises in Malmö, which is kind of close to the central station actually. It's an old car garage, and that's going to be converted into a brewery with a 2,000 litre brewing system. And from what I understand, they are actually hoping to open up a bar up there as well. So I look forward to that opening actually. But they recruited Johan Lagerkrantz as their head brewer, and he spent the last 5 years in New Zealand and has quite a wealth of experience behind him from what I gather. And so there's very exciting times ahead for this brewery. But as of February 2021, when I'm reviewing this beer for you, these guys have produced around 75 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and like I said, they're mainly known for their IPAs and their lager beers, but they do put out a few other things as well actually. They've been putting out their lab series over the last little while, and there's been some really interesting stuff coming out of that actually. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Hyllie Bryggeri for the moment. Like I said, these guys are one of the Swedish breweries that I would recommend that you keep an eye on over 2021, and I look forward to seeing how things go with them over the year when they're establishing this new brewery. I'll need to see about getting a Meet the Brewery segment done with these guys. That was planned actually to be done earlier, but of course COVID-19 hit and things did have to go on the back burner. But Michael told me he was keen to do that at some stage, so we will see about getting that arranged once everything calms down a little bit. But yeah, definitely looking forward to that. But like I say, Hyllie Bryggeri for me, definitely one of the breweries to watch here in Sweden over 2021. Lots of new beers coming out from these guys. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can tell you. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can, of course, check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all of the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's get on and actually have a look at this beer itself then. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, this is a little 330ml can, one of these kind of thin Red Bull sized ones. You can see the lightning bolts on the artwork there, which is very, very nice. But you can see there is the Hyllie Bryggeri symbol on this one, the water tower, which I think is really quite nice. But yeah, if you ever go through the train from Copenhagen to Malmö, you will pass the Hyllie water tower. So yeah, I always like the symbol for Hyllie Bryggeri. But I'm surprised that this beer isn't part of the Labs series. So I'm not sure exactly. The kind of Labs thing, they were doing the Labs 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 and things like that recently, but that seems to have stopped in the recent beers, and they seem to have converted from the 440s to the 330ml cans at the moment. So maybe it just depends on exactly where they're brewing their beers. Maybe they're brewing these ones up at Brewski in Helsingborg, because you know these are the type of cans that Brewski normally use. But yeah, that's interesting point that. But 330ml can, like I said, I think I paid roughly about 35 or 40 Swedish kroners for this one, so that translates, let's say 40, €4, maybe about £3.50 sterling, and maybe about $4.50 American. So yeah, 8.2% IPA this one. It says on the side here that it contains malted barley, hops and yeast, so this one might well turn out to be a West Coaster rather than a New England. No oats and wheat listed in it, but yeah, 330ml, nicely presented, little Harry Potter lightning bolts on it. So let's get it out and we'll get on with the tasting then. Very curious to see what this beer has in store for us. Yeah, let's go for it. So yeah, there we are. Yeah, this is definitely looking more like a kind of West Coast IPA, to be honest with you. Curious to see what bitterness and things that it has. But yeah, 8.2%, as I said, released as part of the Lokalis Moscalit assortment in February of 2021. So yeah, as you can see with this beer, it's poured a lovely, very light kind of amber colour, this one. I wouldn't describe this one as kind of like Pilsner yellow or anything like that. It definitely is. It does have a little bit of a kind of light amber tinge to it, so maybe a bit of biscuit malt or Maris Otter or something like that in here. Definitely some slightly more kind of brown sugary orientated malt, but you can see the beer poured with about a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head. That's just faded away to be a very thin layer, and that's, you know, I can see that just dissipating even more as I'm looking at it, but there is a little bit of a nice kind of foamy ring just around the kind of edge of the glass there, but it does look pretty nice, I have to say. One or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards that surface there, but I mean overall it does look pretty nice, and you can see this beer is pretty damn clear actually. So yeah, definitely in terms of its appearance, it looks a little bit more like a kind of West Coast IPA, and this is a style that I know this brewery do very, very well. And in fairness, it's been nice over the last little while to see that the West Coasters have been coming back into the mix a little bit more, because it's all been kind of haze craze over the last little while. But there's more black IPAs, there's more West Coasters, we've been seeing some brown ales, there's been some rye IPAs and stuff like that coming out now, and it's really nice to see that the beer scene is kind of re-diversifying a little bit. But yeah, it looks quite nice, I have to say. Lovely crystal clear colour, as I said, but let's take a closer look at the aroma and see how we go on. So nothing overly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what style it is, but definitely a little bit more kind of West Coasty looking thus far. So yeah, aroma time. Now that does smell quite interesting. As I say, I don't think this is the most kind of punchy aroma, if you like, that we've had from Hyllie Bryggeri, but it does smell like a really quite nice and quite solid beer. Yeah, so for me, straight away with this beer, you're going to notice a kind of smooth, bready backbone to it, but it comes across as quite oily in the malt base as well. So yeah, definitely a good bit of that coming out there. So you can smell a good little bit of pale malt coming out of the beer. Then on top of that, you're getting a little bit of a kind of brown bready, sort of wholemealy kind of bready thing in there. There's one or two little kind of bread crusty elements to this one. Yeah, definitely a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty element in there, but it's got a nice, just wee smooth, kind of almost slightly sweet brown bready quality coming out of it. For me, there's a good little bit of kind of brown sugar in there. You do get a bit of a sweet caramel out of it, a little bit of a McVitie's kind of digestive biscuit sort of thing, but you can smell that some of these kind of sweeter brown sugary notes in this beer are kind of surround, you know, it's the alcohol that's giving it that, and these sort of boozy brown sugary kind of notes. You know, the aroma of this beer is actually pretty nice. I think going by the aroma, this one definitely comes across as more of a West Coasty IPA. Yeah, it does kind of smoothen out the more that you smell of the beer as well. It's got a really nice kind of, it does come across in the aroma overall, I would say, as quite an oily beer. I think that's definitely a fair statement to make about this one. So it's got a nice big kind of oily West Coasty type malt base to it. I think that's a fair kind of summary of, that is a fair sort of summary of this beer, I would say. But yeah, it goes together actually. It does go together really nicely in that sense. I always like spending a bit of time smelling these kind of West Coasters, because it's almost just a little bit nostalgic, if you like, almost a little bit therapeutic, I want to say. But yeah, I do enjoy these kind of the kind of more boozy aromas that you get out of the West Coast IPAs. So thumbs up to Hyllie Bryggeri for the aroma on the malty side of this one. The more that I smell of it actually, the more it develops a wee bit of a kind of Werther's Original kind of butter candy sort of thing. So that's an interesting point to make out this beer, about this beer as well, because that's something that you would normally find in the likes of New England beers, come to think of it. So yeah, aroma of this one I think is pretty damn nice. So yeah, gets the malty side of this beer I think goes together pretty nicely actually. Definitely a West Coaster from that perspective. But on the fruity side of things then, on the hoppy side of things, you do get a little bit of a kind of earthy note out of the hops here. There is a wee bit of a, you know, there is a little bit of a kind of floral aromatic quality to the beer as well. It doesn't come across as overly dank. I mean, you do get a wee bit of that kind of darker, kind of resinous dankness out of the beer, but at the same time, it comes across as being more sort of floral in a way as well. So to me, it still smells as if this beer, maybe there's not been too many early edition hops in this one, but the thing is, I'll say that and then I'll taste it and it'll be like bitter as hell. It's just kind of sod's law, to be honest with you. But yeah, for me, there's a good balance between the kind of deeper, more dank, piney, resiny notes in this beer, and also the kind of more bright floral aromatic notes sitting on the top. There is a good little bit of a kind of grassy zestiness to the beer as well. So yeah, I like how I do like how all of that goes together in this beer. It does work out. It does work out quite nicely. The green component adds just a nice little bit of depth to the beer actually, so definitely more kind of indications that this is a West Coast type beer. I'm wondering what hops are in this one. I do wonder, maybe there's a wee bit of Columbus being added in here as the bittering hop, because there is something just a little kind of touch spicy and a little bit familiar about the you know, about the sort of I would say, yeah, there is something just a little bit familiar about the kind of the green side of this beer. So maybe a little bit of Chinook, maybe a little bit of Columbus coming out of this one. But on the fruity side of things, again, it's quite familiar. This strikes me as quite an old school beer. Could this just be a Citron Mosaic or something like that that's in here? I always like playing Guess the Hops with these IPAs, but these days it's getting harder and harder because, you know, there's more and more hops out there. So it's, you know, there's so many hops that give you orange, so many hops that give you mango, so many hops that give you these kind of passion fruity, stone fruity sort of things. But on the fruity side of things with this beer, for me, there's a good little bit of a kind of oily mango-y note to this one. There's a little bit of a kind of more pungent passion fruit, but I do get a good little bit of that kind of tangerine-y, orangey sort of thing, and the little bit of earthiness that the beer has, and that kind of juicy tangerine-y orange, that makes me think there's a bit of Mosaic in here. Yeah, there is definitely a wee bit of that kind of bright, juicy tangerine orange to this one, so that makes me want to say yeah, that makes me want to say that there's a bit of how would you say, a bit of Mosaic in this one for sure. So nice kind of light tangerine juicy oranges, bit of mango, a little bit of a more kind of passion fruity quality, and you do get a few kind of sultana-y, apricot-y type qualities to this one. There's just a wee bit of a dried fruity quality coming out of this beer as well. So yeah, it's giving you a lot of the kind of classic elements you would expect of a West Coaster. Really nice aroma to it, and a little bit kind of nostalgic in a way actually, a little bit of an old school kind of West Coaster this one, although it doesn't quite smell as bitter, doesn't quite smell as dank as some of the ones that I've come across before. But yeah, definitely a West Coast IPA for me, this one. Getting a bit of an itchy nose now. Yeah, but yeah, let's have a taste of this one then and see how we get on. Lovely aroma coming out of this beer. This one is the Serendipity Double Ipa, 8.2% ABV. I suspect a West Coast double IPA from Hyllie Bryggeri here in Skåne in the very south of Sweden, from Vintry at the moment to be exact. This one was released as part of the local Småskalig assortment for February of 2021 through Systembolaget. Let's get stuck in. Slange, skål, cheers. Yeah, that's actually a really nice kind of just solid double IPA. The one thing that I've always liked about the Hyllie beers, they always just seem to get a really nice balance between the fruity side of things and the malty side of things. That I really like the way that Hyllie Bryggeri do their malt bases, and you know, I can say that about the Skånsk Lager, the Hyllie Pan, you know, the black IPA that we had recently, the Cartwright Double IPA, which was basically a double version of the original Hyllie Pan, the Bite the Dust, the brown ale that we had last month. Again, the malt base in that was really nicely done. I don't know what it is about Hyllie, but their malt bases are always just, you know, spot on. Don't know what it is about them, but you know, as I've told you before in other videos, a lot of people are all about the hops, but for me it's all about the balance in the beers. I really love a good malt base in a beer, and I think quite often it's overlooked these days, but Hyllie Bryggeri I think are one of the ones who seem to get it right, you know, 95% of the time. These guys are really solid with their malty side of things, but this beer again, as a West Coast double IPA, and I think it's safe to call it that, it's really it's a big oily thing, this smooth maltiness, nice kind of big oily sweet character in there as well, big oily fruits but still a little bit of juiciness. Then you've got that nice kind of dynasty expect. This is a West Coast double IPA for me, this one. And it's definitely one of this kind of more biscuity leaning ones. As I've told you, with West Coast IPAs, I think there's kind of two directions you can take those in. You can have them being like really big and oily and caramelly, such as the Sierra Nevada Torpedo, or you can take them to the more kind of light and biscuity and bready end of the spectrum, such as you would with the Pliny the Elder. And this one's really a more kind of Pliny Elder type beer, this one for sure. I think it might actually be, I can't remember if Pliny the Elder is 8% or if it's 8.2. So I don't know, could this one be? There is just something old school about this beer. It's a lot of the hoppy qualities I'm getting out of this one actually make me wonder, you know, because obviously the thing is, I think Pliny has Amarillo in it rather than Mosaic, if I remember right. It's got Centennial, I remember too. But there is just something oddly familiar about this beer. So there's a lot of breweries at the moment brewing these kind of more old school West Coasters, and like I say, this beer's a little bit kind of nostalgic for me in a sense. So yeah, when we're talking about Serendipity, there's something a wee bit afoot there, I would say. Maybe this is meant to be like a tribute beer or something like that, but regardless, it's a lovely West Coast IPA, this one. So once again, thumbs up to Hyllie Bryggeri for this. Is another very, very solid beer from them, and that's what I've come to expect from this brewery. Yeah, I really like this one. Absolutely, I think it is better, to be honest, that they released this in a 330 rather than a 440. But yeah, this is definitely a taster beer for me rather than a kind of sessioning one, if you like. But yeah, it is very, very nice. So where to start with this one then? Straight away with this beer, you can feel a nice little bit of you can feel a nice little bit of a kind of smooth bready quality just blanketing the middle of your palate with this beer. So for me, it goes it actually gets very oily very quickly, but you can feel this beer has a little bit of an almost kind of brown bready wholemeally sort of base to the beer, to be honest with you. That kind of blankets the middle third of your palate there, but sitting on top of that, it's just got another layer of a very kind of slick but also smooth kind of brown sugary note. If you go to the very centre of your tongue, there's definitely a bit of a kind of straight up sweet caramel there, and then you can feel as you move further out from that, it becomes like a sort of oily McVitie's Digestive kind of thing, but then you get the more kind of grainy elements of the biscuit just kind of coming out a little bit after that actually. So that's definitely something to note about this beer for sure. So yeah, I would definitely say that about this one, absolutely. It's got a lovely just kind of oily character to it in a lot of ways, so yeah. So yeah, that oily character that the beer has in the middle of the palate, a lot of the kind of brown sugary notes that you're getting out of this are the more kind of alcoholic flavours in a sense. I would definitely say that about this one. It is the more kind of boozy flavours that you're getting out of this beer, definitely, and I can really appreciate that about this one for sure as well. So yeah, I think middle third of your palate, I think again it's pretty straight shooting. Nice little bit of a kind of slightly brown bready base to it. You might get one or two little very slightly woody notes underneath, but that's very, very minimal. But then on top of that, boozy caramel in the very centre, little bit of a kind of biscuity McVitie's Digestive biscuity quality surrounding that, then it just gets gradually more kind of grainy and biscuity as you move out further towards the edge of the palate. If you go back to that kind of border region between middle third and back third of your tongue, the beer's distinctly more kind of bread crusty. Then on the back third of your palate, you get a little bit more of that kind of brown bready thing sort of sitting there, and it just feels a little bit thicker on the back third of your palate too. But yeah, very straight shooting in its malt base, and as I say, just a little bit kind of nostalgic. So let's move on to the hoppy side of the beer then. I don't think there's too much more just to say about the malty side of things. But yeah, in the back corners of the palate, definitely a wee bit of earthiness there, and as you move further forward, it quite quickly develops to have that sort of almost kind of piney resinous backbone to it, and then it starts to become more kind of spicy and floral as you move further forward. I do suspect there's a bit of Columbus and a bit of Chinook in this one. It feels, the bitter side of this beer feels really quite familiar actually, and then round the front curve of the palate, it's just a wee bit more kind of lighter and grassy in a sense. So yeah, the green component of this beer is again typical kind of classic West Coast IPA. So yeah, there is just, as I say, there's just something really old school and very kind of striking, nostalgic about this beer for sure. But yeah, that covers the green component of things. It's got a nice little bit of a bitterness to it. It gives you what you would want from this particular style category, if you like. So yeah, and the more that you drink of this, you can feel it just kind of sweetens up a little bit. But yeah, let's focus on the fruity side of things then. So as I always say, that front third of your tongue's where you get the nice oily bubble, where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So on that border region between middle third and front third of your palate, again you get a wee bit of a kind of bread crusty quality there. Then forming the underlayer of the fruity notes, it's a sort of smooth brown bready kind of thing. So if you go towards the back of that front third of your palate, in there, in that front third of your palate, in there, there's a wee bit of a stronger kind of passion fruity note, and as you move further forward from that, you start to get a wee bit of a kind of mango quality. So I do wonder, could this be like a Citra Simcoe kind of thing in here? There's just something a little bit familiar about this, about the kind of fruity makeup in this beer. But yeah, a little bit of a kind of stronger passion fruit, wee bit of a slightly lighter mango as you move further forward. You will get wee undertones of like apricots, sultanas, a little bit of pear almost in this kind of thing. Then as you move on to the front half of that front third of your tongue, it's a distinctly more kind of orangey, oily sort of thing there. And I think that will be either Amarillo or Mosaic, to be honest with you. And as you move towards the very kind of front edge of the tongue, it's got a wee bit of, it does have a wee bit of a more kind of lemony, zesty sort of thing to it. Could there be a wee bit of Centennial or something in the beer? It's given me a wee bit of that. Yeah, it's interesting, that for sure. I think this is quite old school hops that's in this, and again, it is this sort of thing that there's a wee bit of a sort of nostalgic thing going on in here. There's you know, things that are familiar, is the way that the kind of mango and the passion fruit are making me think, yeah, this could be Citra Simcoe. The way that the orangey note is, it could be Amarillo, but it feels a little bit lighter, so I'm more inclined to say it's Mosaic, to be honest. And then there's just a wee bit of zestiness at the front of the tongue too that makes me think maybe, you know, it could be Centennial that's in this one. So again, there's just something about this beer that makes me think a little bit along the lines of Pliny the Elder. I do wonder about that. It really has a little bit of that vibe, and it's because I tried that beer fairly recently. That's probably what I'm kind of latching on to, that kind of concept of it. But again, this beer sort of sweetens up the kind of further that you go into the aftertaste with it. More of the kind of sweetness of the fruit comes out, and more of the sweetness of the malty side of things is in there too. But yeah, I really like how all that kind of pieces together. So thumbs up to Hyllie Bryggeri for how this beer comes out. It has got that really nice kind of nostalgic West Coast type IPA to it, so I like that. Been missing the West Coasters, but recently there's been quite a few of them to enjoy, which is great. But yeah, I think that kind of sums up the sort of the flavour profile of this one quite nicely, to be honest with you. So yeah, let's focus on the mouthfeel just to round off the review then. So I would describe this beer as being sort of, you know, kind of middle of the road, kind of bottom end of full bodied, that kind of thing. It's definitely towards the kind of the middle to kind of bottom end of full bodied for me. Carbonation, it's very, very smooth. It is quite an oily mouthfeel, which is what you want from a West Coaster. In terms of hoppy bitterness and stuff, I'd be tempted to say that this beer, it doesn't feel quite as bitter as some of the West Coasters. Maybe this is, I think that, although in fairness, I think the bitterness does build up the further you go into the aftertaste with it. Maybe it does have a sort of 70 IBU note, 60 or 70 IBUs, but I think normally for these beers, a lot of them were between 80 and 100. So it does feel like that. You do get more of the kind of danky notes kind of coming out in the beer on the side of the tongue the further you go into the aftertaste, but it's got a nice kind of smoothness to the malt base underneath, good little bit of oily sweetness there, and the fruits, as I said, have a really good balance between being kind of juicy and oily as well. But overall, it's a solid West Coast Double IPA, this one. So yeah, I do wish that a lot of the breweries would say like it's a West Coast Double IPA, it's a New England Double IPA. They've just called it a straight up Double IPA in this one, but this for me definitely a West Coaster. But yeah, lovely beer, this one. As I say, I do wonder if this beer is intended to be like as a tribute to Pliny the Elder, because there's a lot of things about this beer that just remind me of Pliny actually. But it's regardless of what it is, it's a solid West Coast IPA, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to drink this again. I wonder if this is a beer they're going to release every year actually, because it did say there was a few different kind of vintages of it. There was a Serendipity 2020, then there was a Serendipity 2021. So maybe this is something that they release every year actually, but regardless, it is very nicely done. So yeah, let's leave it there then. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comments section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Hyllie Bryggeri. We will return to these guys very soon, I've no doubt about that, because they're always releasing new stuff. But this one was the Serendipity Double IPA, 8.2% ABV. We found out it's definitely a West Coast IPA, and quite a nostalgic old school West Coast IPA at that. Nothing wrong with that. Really reminds me a lot of Pliny the Elder. So if you enjoy that beer, I think you will quite enjoy this one actually. It's, you know, really nicely executed. So yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching. Check out my social media, check out Hyllie Bryggeri, and I look forward to my next review from these guys. The Serendipity Double IPA, 8.2% ABV. Slange, skull, cheers, and catch you guys in the next review.